Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another discussion. Actually, if I recall, is this our first discussion directly pertaining to a Let's Play that we've just done?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because usually all of our other discussions are other random topics. Never really one, connecting to a game that we actually played.
Yeah.
Right.
Alrighty then. So, for those of you who are, I guess, just joining in and haven't been following, I have recently finished Eternal Sonata, and I promised that I would be doing a character discussion with these boys, because in my opinion, the characters are probably the strongest element of the game, and there's a lot to talk about with these characters. It's just, unfortunately, I couldn't get too much into detail, until you've seen the game from beginning to end. So, I apologize if you haven't been following and it sounds confusing and everything. Please go watch the Let's Play so you can kind of, follow along what the hell we're talking about.
We'll see you like 80 hours from now.
Yeah. Now, if you happen to listen and if you're like, oh, hey, this actually sounds pretty interesting, then go watch the Let's Play.
Oh my god. Anyway.
Alrighty. Okay, so I guess this is how we'll do it. We'll just go, we'll go down the list of characters. I'll bring up pretty much things like, what it, like behind the scenes stuff, like, what did the directors intend for each character, because there are some that are confirmed as to this is what these characters are supposed to represent, and then there are characters that pretty much had no word from the creators whatsoever. So this is where we kind of gotta, come up with our own interpretations, and I'm really curious to see what did you guys take away from all this. So, let's actually start with our heroine, Polka. Do you guys, I imagine Polka representing Amelia should be friggin' obvious.
Mm-hmm. I mean, all things considered, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, pretty much from the beginning, it was very obvious. Like, as soon as, I think we got to chapter 4, when Frederick brings up that he had a younger sister who was 14 years old, and then she died of tuberculosis, it was like, yep, there's your connection right then and there. So, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Polka is the embodiment of his long-dead sister.
I gotta say, her name isn't really fitting to the character, because Polka, for the most part, she's she's rather lively, but she's also very like to herself. She's rather quiet. Like she really only speaks up when she feels strongly about something. The music Polka, at least as far as I'm aware, isn't that really upbeat music?
Well, it can be.
I've never heard of quiet polka music.
Hey, everybody,
I know.
Pokemon.
Shut up.
I was just thinking about that song too.
You're both terrible. Anyway, I'm aware that polka can be interpreted. Like, it doesn't have to just be upbeat. I mean, I'm not sure if keeping the same instrumentation and same style would pertain to what if it changes from polka to something else entirely. But the genre it's pretty much relatively the same no matter how it's performed. Like, whether it be slow, whether it be fast, whether it be upbeat, whether it be relaxing.
Mm.
So something tells me, never mind.
Right. Now, what you call it? So there's a couple of things about Polka that, I want to bring up, and a lot of it is, probably more so exclusive to the PlayStation 3 version, because, once again, that's the version that I showed off in the Let's Play, so that's all I've got experience on. So I had brought up before about this whole rock thing. So the whole point about how, she got this rock from somebody that she loved, and, again, I think it kind of bears repeating, with the ending. When Polka flings herself off the cliff at the very end to basically reset the whole cycle and everything, nothing else is really brought back with her except for the rock, but none of her memories or anything were with it, except for the fact that she got this rock from somebody that she loved. The directors, unfortunately, never really explained that, because it's I don't know, to me that seems a little off, because once you bring a plot point like that, then it's okay, why does nobody else remember anything? Why was it just Polka? Or why did Polka only remember, oh, I got it from someone that I love, but she doesn't remember Allegretto. So it's like, I don't know, to me, that's probably like the one thing about the way they handled Polka's character I really did not get.
I think a part of it is, like, because we saw that, when the timeline loops, we saw that once, when Polka jumps off the cliff, she ends up back as an 8-year-old girl again, in that meadow where, I guess, where her adopted mother found her. And I guess it's assumed that, yeah, she keeps the rock with her, but, like, when, I guess to stick with how they're planning this, I guess the supposed very first time that sequence started, before it started looping, like, it's safe to assume that she couldn't have had that rock with her the first time. So, I guess when she jumped off the cliff, the rock, it was on her person, so it somehow stayed, and then, yeah, like the whole deal where it's like when everything looped, everyone loses their memories, but she keeps the rock. She keeps what's associated with it. So now, I think maybe what they were trying to pull off was that, yeah, it's this loop is forcing everyone to forget everything that they've ever gone through, as well as forgetting each other up until they meet again. But it's I don't know the terms. It's like a shit. It's magic. It's magic.
Yes. It's like, I've got no idea where you're going with this, so I kind of can't help you there.
It's a visual association thing. Like everyone has a trigger to their memory whenever they look at something. Like because typically everything can be associated with something else. Like if you look to your left, and whatever is the first thing you see will instantly trigger some form of memory to something else. So when Polka looks at the rock, the first thing that's the first thing she remembers is where she got it from. Even if she's unable to remember who she got it from specifically, she knows where she got it from. So,
right,
it's one of those association things.
Yeah,
maybe.
I see what you mean.
Okay. Alrighty. And then, I guess another thing to bring up. So, as far as Polka's illness, this is like another thing where it's like, I think at least prior to the PlayStation 3 version, I'd like to believe that it was more so implied, like, yes, it is established that in this world that if you are suffering from a terminal illness, then you develop magical powers and everything. And I mean,
it's no Serenade guy with that. What the fuck?
But it's like, what happened was, so obviously that's supposed to be the direct connection between, how Amelia died in the first place. She died of tuberculosis. And, at the time, tuberculosis, it was a major disease back then. There really was no cure and everything, and people back then actually did think that it was contagious. That was why, people were, keeping their distance from Polka for so long. But I think, at least in the 360 version, I think they were trying to go with the idea that, okay, it's not so much a terminal illness that Polka's suffering from. The reason that she's got all this magic and everything is because she's about to go on this journey that's going to lead to her death and everything. So, she's got the magical abilities. It's just not from the illness. It's more so just from this tragic fate that she's going to have. And I would be inclined to believe that. But then if you remember, there's the scene where they're in Baroque, and all of a sudden she just collapses. And they're saying, like, it's because, oh no, it's the illness and everything. And that was, when we had to go back to a go-go forest and everything to get the go-go's to help her and everything. So, and that was PlayStation 3 exclusive. So this is where, now you kind of confuse me here, because it's like, okay, if they were trying to go with the angle that in this world where you're getting magic from suffering from a terminal illness, but Polka suffers differently in like a more unique way and everything. It's like, I can get behind that. But then they threw this whole scene and side quest thing in there for the PlayStation 3 exclusive, so that's where it's like, well, wait, is she truly suffering from an illness or not?
Right.
I think they probably needed to throw that scene in there to remind you, oh yeah, she's sick.
Well,
it's like, oh yeah, that's a thing, isn't it? Well, crap.
I mean, though I guess to be fair, considering how the story progressed and how everyone was interacting with each other, you probably wouldn't think to remember that, yeah, Polka has a terminal illness, which wasn't really established until like the very beginning of the game and moving forward.
Right, yeah, it was a lot of the, yeah, you're right. It was I think it's like, from all of the in-between stuff that happened from when we first learned about Polka's illness and then up until the moment where she passed out.
Yeah, it's like there's your reminder right there, because it was a while since that moment in time.
Right, pretty much.
Alright. Okay, anything else that you boys want to add regarding Polka?
There was one thing, but I think we'll wait until we get to Allegretto.
Okay. Actually, that's probably a good transition to go into. And actually, well, let me actually bring up this little factoid here, because this is actually something I looked into while I was recording for the Let's Play. So, on a whim, I was just really curious because, we knew that Emilia died at 14. But they never said how old was Frederick when she died. Because I think that would also tie into, like, how he took her death, because he did not take it well at all. So it's like, how far, what was the age gap in between? So, of course, the game doesn't bring this up, so I turned to Wikipedia. Frederick was 2 years older, making him 16. Allegretto is 16. That entire cutscene of him screaming and everything about how Polka died is a visual representation of Frederick taking Amelia's death.
That's Frederick and Amelia are brother and sister, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no. Allegretto is not supposed to be the representation of Frederick.
I get you, but...
Yeah, I mean, if that was the case, Frederick wouldn't be in the story to begin with if that was the case.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of interesting, though.
Yeah, because that's why I was just really curious about that, and I was like, wait a minute, he was 16? And I was like, son of a bitch, Allegretto was 16! And then that ending clicked, and I'm like, oh my god, it makes sense now. Because it was like, before I was like, yeah, he was upset because, he's grieving and everything because, he just witnessed this girl that he fell in love with just sacrifice herself. And it's like, Sam Riegel, I thought, nailed that scene. Like, he hit it out of the park and everything. I mean, that's like... I know earlier we were talking about Final Fantasy VII during Clava's death, The way Sam Riegel performed with Allegretto during that last cutscene, like showing him grieving but also very angry and confused, that's the kind of acting I'm expecting in the Final Fantasy VII remake with Aerith's death.
Right.
Like, that's what I expect from Cloud's voice actor.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, I can only hope.
I mean, because in every other game that we see Cloud in, like, say, Kingdom Hearts or Dissidia, we never really hear Cloud, like, express, like, outrageous emotion. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can tell in certain scenes of, like, Dissidia or Final Fantasy, yeah, Cloud will match his emotions with whatever's going on, but you don't really hear any outbursts from him. So that's gonna be really interesting if they do decide to take that approach with Cloud in the remake.
Yeah. But anyway, back to Allegretto. So Allegretto, more or less, is, I guess you could argue, he's the more realistic side to Frederick. Because if you notice how in a lot of the cutscenes, whenever people start bringing up, like, their own theories and everything, Allegretto's usually the first one to step in and poke a hole in it. he did it from the beginning when they were trying to figure out, like, not so much figure out, but they were, like, discussing, like, what's the best solution to the problem when it comes to the taxes versus, saving a go-go forest from the mining with the mineral powder and everything. And it was like, everyone's saying, oh, well, why don't we just stop the mining? Why don't we just stop the taxes and stuff? Allegretto's the one that's going, you can't really do that because then you're going to cause this. So it's like, he was usually, I guess, like, the more, like, realistic, like, down-to-earth kind of guy. I mean, even when Polka passed out and everything, and they're talking about how, the whole Astra and everything, and how this could all be tied to her illness and everything, Allegretto specifically screams out, look, your theories are useless. It's not going to help Polka. And it's like, and I mean, at least that's the way I'm interpreting this, just because there's this, if you remember, there's a scene in, in Baroque, where Frederick actually called out Crescendo and Serenade, when they're saying, we were helping Andantino, but now we don't want to, because we don't want to cause, any more suffering and everything, and Frederick basically pulls an Allegretto and is like, you do realize if you do this, this is what's going to happen. So, I mean, it's like, that pretty much was Frederick's, calling people shit out and everything. And Allegretto has been doing that since the very beginning. So, for me, that's what Allegretto represents.
Yeah, that makes sense, honestly.
More realistic, maybe a little bit more cynical, but, overall, still a good-natured person.
Right,
Oh, you notice in general with Allegretto, like, there's definitely a lot of maturity that he goes throughout the story. Like we see in the very beginning, he's a very snarky kid. I noticed in the beginning, and then I notice a lot of maturity of him as it goes along. But at the same time, I also noticed how as his feelings for Polka increased, like that seemed to have been more of his main point after a while.
Yeah, how can I help Polka?
Yeah. Like 16-year-old boy, that makes sense. I mean, well, he just wants to poke a hole in Polka is all. I mean,
Anyway.
Thank you, good night. No, it's like regardless of what happens, it's like I'm just glad that OTP that actually happened. It's like thank you God.
So laughing, like I was waiting for them to kiss. And Waltz was like, they're not gonna kiss. They fucking kiss.
That's why I was like, I'm keeping my mouth shut. I am keeping my mouth shut.
Oh yeah, that was great. It's like, okay, I just wanted those two to kiss. All right, I'm sorry, but
oh boy.
Anyway,
alrighty then.
How about Beat next?
Yeah, okay, so Beat. Beat is one of the characters that really has no explanation. Like, the developers have not come forward and said what he possibly represents, so... Alright, theory time! What do you guys think?
Allegretto needed a wacky sidekick. That's literally the only thing I can think. I'm not being serious. Like, that's the only thing I can think of.
Allegretto is like if Allegretto was Aladdin and B was Abu. That's how I picture those two as.
Mm.
Oh, come on. I mean, at one point they stole bread.
When you put it that way.
All this for a loaf of bread?
Except Beat was more the compassionate one, whereas Abu would just keep the bread for himself.
Right.
Anyway.
Abu!
Imagine Abu with that shotgun. Monkey with a shotgun.
Oh, God.
Okay, so then, I guess, Brandon, Ryan, do you got any theories on what, Beat can represent?
It's really it's kind of hard to lay a theory down on the character. Well, I guess more specifically, the only real time we got to see most of Beat throughout the Let's Play was during the cutscenes, because after the fight with Tuba, you were just like, nope, it's done. We're not using Beat anymore.
Yeah, there really is no reason to use him.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, well, I don't know. Like, from what I'm going by what I've seen in the cutscenes, but from what I've seen in the cutscenes anyway, I feel like Beat is a very what's the word I'm trying to go for here? He's a very something character.
Some characters.
Well, because like I'm trying to fill in the blank. I don't know what I'm going for though. It's weird.
Well, man,
Beat feels like a really relatable character in some aspects, and I do find that really nice about him. Like
a relatable character, like in what regard?
Like just how he feels about certain things, the certain stuff that he goes through throughout the story. I mean, his passion for photography, which is one thing. Like Beat has a passion. That's what I'm looking for. Beat has a lot of passion in his character.
I can definitely see that. It's like, like you bring up the whole camera thing. That's like, it was like, again, kind of going back to like Allegretto, where it's like Allegretto was constantly giving Beat shit and everything, saying, look at the world with your own eyes, don't look at it through, that bent lens and everything, and Beat would constantly get on his case over it.
Yeah, exactly. That's Beat's a very passionate character. There we go.
Yeah, he's passionate, but at the same time, he also has that a very innocence of like a little kid.
Well, he is a little kid, obviously.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's one of 3 characters that are literally children. I mean, he is 8 years old.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he does look at everything with, like, perhaps, I guess, maybe a little, hopeful, optimistic, a little naive to the ways of the world. But, I mean, he's just an innocent little kid.
Which is good.
That just kind of got caught up in the middle of all this. And yet, even though, all this stuff was still happening and, there were moments in the game and stuff that, it does affect him. I mean, like, he was, like, crying and stuff with Polka and everything, but, he never really lost the innocence. And that's kind of where I'm thinking, maybe, for me, maybe Beat possibly represents, maybe it's that tiny shred of innocence that is buried deep within Frederick.
You know what? That actually makes sense in context, because the idea is like that. I mean, it's so tiny at this point that kind of represents how insignificant Beat was to the story.
Wait, you can't say that.
I'm being serious though. Like, he has such a small part. Like, I brought up earlier how he just seems like more of a sidekick to Allegretto more than anything else. Like hell, at the beginning of the LP, I was joking about how much of a Digimon he just reminds me of. Like, maybe that's what it really is.
Yeah.
Well, at least he had a role. And I say this because, you know what? I'm actually shocked. I did not bring this up. There's a manga adaptation to Eternal Sonata.
Wait,
oh, really?
I actually would not recommend reading it. Mostly because it goes in a completely different direction with the game. And, I mean, to me, it just kind of defeats the purpose. It basically, it's not, the manga makes the story, it's not about Frederick, it's about Allegretto and Polka. And it's where it's like, you kind of defeat the whole purpose of the story.
Seems about right, though, all things considered.
Right. But there's the thing, Beat was in that manga, and Beat did nothing. No combat, nothing. He just tagged along.
He was just there for the food.
So, the wacky sidekick.
That's where I will agree. Yeah, Beat as the wacky sidekick. Yeah, that's definitely true in the manga adaptation. I wouldn't necessarily say that so much in the game, because I mean, he did have his uses and stuff. I mean, even if it was just like participating in combat, and he did help out with all the stuff going on in Baroque and everything when the party was separated. So I mean, it's like he did manage to hold his own on a couple of occasions.
Yeah.
So which to me I think makes him stand out a little bit more than just being he's just a kooky sidekick. That was definitely true in the manga. I wouldn't say that in the game.
Right. Okay.
All right, so I guess from here, let's talk about the twins, March and Salsa. We met March first, but we actually got her very late in the game. And then Salsa we met shortly afterwards, and then we got her fairly early on, and she kind of stuck around throughout the majority of the game. So, And once again, the developers, there is no word on what these two represent. So, theory time!
They're there as the guardians of the Go-Go Forest. So what can we say about the? So I guess in order maybe to learn a little more about them, let's kind of delve a bit more into the Agogos then.
Okay.
What do the Agogos represent?
The Agogos, I'm not sure if the Agogos necessarily represent anything. Throughout the game, we were, not so much throughout the game, about halfway through the game, we were introduced to this legend, like, they call it the Legend of Light, or, the Agogo legend and everything. Basically, it was something that was passed down from the Forest Guardians that March had to look into. And basically, she brought up about how, the Agogos, they reflect the light in somebody's heart, and, when someone's heart or Astra shines very brightly, that's when the Agogos begin to glow, and that when the time comes, the Agogos will basically grant the wish of the suffering maiden, and basically make everything happy and everything. That was nothing more than foreshadowing to what the hell's going to happen at the very end, because sure enough, Polka jumps off the cliff, time resets, but then, Frederick makes the declaration, I choose to call the flower Heaven's Mirror and everything, and basically it's like, okay, we're not going backward, we're going forward. If you remembered, Polka was surrounded by the glowing Agogos.
Yeah.
Which brought her around and everything. I don't think the Agogos necessarily represent anything with Frederick himself so much as I think they're just more so like the plot important means of, basically being like, all right, if we can move forward, then that's the true role of the Agogos.
We got a go forward.
But
No words.
And then things got extremely awkward.
No.
That's my new headcanon as to why they're called that.
No words.
Yeah. But anyway, so with these little creatures, like we said, there are two guardians. The March and Salsa, they are the twins. March, she's very demure, very calm, very kind. Research is her passion. She loves reading into history and all that other stuff, which is where we got this legend in the first place. Pretty much a lot of the explanations with the Agogos came directly from March. Meanwhile, her sister Salsa, she's very feisty, very loud, very brash. March is the kind of person where it's like, okay, if I'm going to tackle a problem, I'm going to think it through from the beginning to the end, whereas Salsa's more is like, well, if you do that, then, you run the risk. Basically, you have to act fast, because if you take too long, something bad's going to happen, and that's why she dives head first, without thinking. So it's like, it's the whole opposite thing going on with the two.
Yeah.
I mean,
in a way, kind of like a yin and a yang kind of deal, sort of, maybe.
Right, and this is where I can't help but think, like, especially when you got to that cutscene, like, you remember when we're fighting all four of the bosses at Double Reed Tower, and, before we fought Waltz the second time, and after every boss encounter, we got, like, a little cutscene of, like, everybody talking, and Frederick just kind of sitting there and really taking in what they're listening to, and it's like, you got the cutscene with March and Salsa, and, that was very clear where, Salsa is saying, like, she starts calling Frederick out on some of his shit, saying, saying how, she called him a quitter, and saying how, when something ends, something new begins, and everything, and, March is more like, well, yeah, I agree, I wouldn't have worded it like that, I would have worded it a little bit more delicately, but I kind of get the gist of, I definitely get where you're coming from. So it's like, I can't help but think that maybe, like, March and Salsa are supposed to maybe represent, I guess, like a conscience or something, like, angel devil on the shoulder. Maybe or something, like,
I don't know why, it's kind of hard to say.
Maybe Salsa just represents Frederick's hidden love for pirates.
Yeah, or, well, that's just like, yeah, I don't know, maybe that's like, that's like Frederick's sign of, like, him being, like, courageous and whatnot, like, not being afraid to just go ahead and just jump right into the action.
Well, I really don't know about that, Dani, because, like, we already brought up before how Allegretto was more so the one who acted like the realist. Like, he was the one that brought up, like, all those details and such. Like, March and Salsa never really went. Never really like they did that once, but that was about it. Aside from that, Salsa was just kind of there, whereas March was the one that supplied majority of, I guess, the
plot important information.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
I suppose. Yeah, because it's like, this is just one of those characters where it's like, there's no explanation, so, take with it what you will.
Right.
I'd like to think that when it comes to the characters, they each kind of have their own separate emotion or separate thing about themselves. Pretty much things that just separate themselves from each other. And
more than...
But
sorry.
No, I mean, all the characters having separate details about each other, not just in terms of their design, but in terms of how they are. That could possibly have a little representation in Frederick. I mean, because actually, now that I think about it, when it came to the story and the dialogue, I mean, a lot of the other characters did a lot more talking than Frederick did. So I don't know. I mean, it's like if people were to think of Frederick as like this emotionless kind of character, whereas only because a lot of the other characters did the majority of the talking in terms of dialogue, I don't know, maybe something about the other characters and in their dialogue could possibly also represent Frederick in a way.
Well, more than likely what I'm kind of the conclusion I'm coming to here, more than likely March and Salsa were just more so there as like a plot device to help better explain the Go-Go's, which were a sense in this game's MacGuffin.
I mean, I guess that's also a possibility.
Because the Go-Go's themselves didn't talk, so they couldn't exactly explain what was going on with themselves. So they needed characters there to help do that. So that's more than likely what March and Salsa were there.
I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm trying not to think of the characters as just people or some of the characters as people who are just there.
Well, I mean, there's going to be
or just there to serve a.
Well, that's just kind of
super
how it
minor
works,
role.
Though.
I mean, I get that's how it works, but with a game like Eternal Sonata,
in every story, there's going to be characters that are there for a very specific role, and then for the rest of the story, they only serve very minor roles at that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not doubting you or anything in that regard. I'm just saying, like when it comes to a game like Eternal Sonata, you wouldn't want to think that certain characters only play very minor roles to a story like that.
You may not want to think that, but that doesn't mean that it isn't the case.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, unfortunately, I think that's pretty much the kind of role that a character like Salsa falls into, even though, for the most part, Salsa has been around in the group, like, much longer than March.
and yet March was the one to provide all this valuable information.
And March was the one that we liked more.
Right, yeah.
Anyway, so, alright, so I guess, with this whole discussion with Salsa, like, not really figuring out, like, what it is that, she contributes and everything. See, that's where, I mean, it's like, to me, I can't help but feel it's like, when I'm listening to these conversations and stuff in the game and everything, I mean, it's like, it's clear she represents something. I'm just not sure what, but she does represent something. Viola, on the other hand, is the one that really stumps me. I have no fucking clue what she's supposed to represent. And it's a shame, too, because I really like Viola as a character. But I don't know what she's supposed to represent.
Like, Viola more than likely falls into the same category as like, what I theorized for March and Salsa. She showed up literally to bring up the doubt to bring up the idea that mineral powder is bad for people. That she created that mindset for us. It ended up being true, but pretty much she was literally there to introduce that to us, and then after that she was just along for the ride. That and maybe she represents like Frederick's hidden love for archery. I don't know.
No, because I mean that's like
no, it was Frederick's hidden love for goats
or stringed instruments.
Well, I mean, this is just the thing that really, like, stumps me, and it's like, I was, like, trying to think, like, I was really, like, going like above and beyond, trying to think like, you know, thinking outside the box, like what the hell could Viola possibly represent? Because I mean, it's like when you look at her personality and everything, I mean, she does act like, you know, she's like the big sister of the group. And Frederick actually did have an older sister. She was actually she was the woman with the brown hair that was at his bedside as he was dying and everything. So he had an older sister. So I was like, oh, you would think maybe that's what she represents, except that's what Solfege represents, Polka's mother. So that's where it's like, well, okay, that's clearly out of the question. You know, you'd think, like, she's the one that has Arco, that little squirrel thing or something that just pops out just to be cute and adorable. But it's like, there's no real significance for that. I was even trying to think, like, you know, with the goats and everything. That's where it's like, I was even looking up, like, okay, goats. There's gotta be a reason with the fucking goats. She even styled her hair as fucking goat horns. There has to be something with the goats. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe, like, you know, was the city he was born in, like, what was it called, like, Zelazola Wola or something? Like, was that, did that just happen to be, like, a goat town or something that he was born into? No, that's not it either, because I looked it up and no goats.
Really stretching for that answer.
I was trying to find anything, and I can't find shit.
Oh, man.
So it's like, Viola, why are you here? It's like, I love you, Viola, I really do, but really, why are you here?
Oh boy.
There has to be a reason, because like every other character
there has to be a
has
logical reason other than you being a beast and just dealing massive blows with your fucking arrows.
It's like I said, more than likely she just falls into the position of simply plot, and that's it. Like to bring up a major plot point and then be done with it.
But I mean, it's like she was also like she and Allegretto were the ones that really thought of the whole like brought up to Jazz's attention about dude, there's a spy in your group. So it's like, you know, she was very active and everything, like, you know, especially with Jazz. So I mean, it's like, you know, the whole mineral powder thing was how she was introduced, but she also brought up a couple of other things relative to this overall narrative as well. So it's where it's like, you know, it's like, this is gonna bug the shit out of me, because it's like when every other character has contributed something and reflects something with Frederick, and then you have this one character that I just cannot figure it out.
Oh man.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, audience, you're gonna have to help us out here. What do you think Viola could possibly represent?
Yeah.
Because the game sure as hell isn't gonna help us. Alrighty. Okay, so I guess with that, let's actually move on to Andantino. So let's actually start with Jazz.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Jazz, this one is confirmed by the developers and everything. So a lot of pretty much Jazz's entire backstory is tied back to the whole Polish rebellion that you may remember that was introduced in Chapter 2 and was frequently brought up in the other music history lessons throughout the game, where a bunch of the Polish citizens, they led this uprising, and the uprising ultimately failed. And Chopin, you know, a Polish citizen and a very proud Polish citizen, you know, if he could, he would have been there to help. But, you know, between his weak constitution and plus the fact that, you know, he's traveling all around Europe because, you know, he's a famous pianist and everything. And, you know, he's basically, as this whole uprising was going on, he was in France, he was in Austria, you know, he was tucked away in the safety of other countries. And he had to sit there and listen as, you know, to this whole failing uprising happened. So Jazz being a part of it and being the leader of Andantino and everything, you know, Jazz pretty much is there to represent. Jazz is the man that Frederick wishes he could have been.
Seems about right.
Yeah.
Like, that is flat out confirmed by the developers. That is pretty much what he represents.
Oh, okay. Well,
Frederick wishes that he can be Wesker.
Oh no.
Chris Redfield. Oh, god damn it.
Do I frighten you?
Count Waltz.
Count Waltz. Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's time to close the book on us, Frederick.
So then, I guess Jazz is a character. Then Jazz went through that whole shtick with the claves and falsetto, but did his character really develop at all throughout the story?
I can't do Wesker voice. I'm sorry.
No, it's so
It's like I would say, you know, it did develop a little bit, but it was more so like, you know, I would probably argue like, you know, it's more so his relationship with Viola and falsetto was probably what changed the most with him. Because I mean, other than that, I mean, it's like, you know, the way he was from the beginning was pretty damn close to how he was at the end. It's just, you know, if you remember, like, you know, we had the cutscenes with him and Viola throughout the game. Like, you know, before it was just, he saw her as like, oh, she's just another companion. But then, like, you know, when everybody was in Baroque before they went to the temple and eventually got falsetto back, you definitely see that he's warmed up to her a lot more. And, you know, there's that freaking scene that made us go, you ruined the OTP.
damn it.
So I mean, it's like, you know, so I mean, there definitely was development and everything. It's more so, I would say, with like, it's more so his relationship with specific characters that changed. You know, it's like you really got to see how close he was with falsetto because, you know, yeah, in the beginning he was very unsure of falsetto because of how she was treating claves, and Jazz and claves were going out. But then claves died, and falsetto takes off, and basically everything, you know, goes topsy-turvy and everything for Jazz, so that when falsetto comes back, you know, he does treat her a lot more kindly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, you know, that's more so I think where his development comes from. It's not so much like himself, like, overall, just so much as, you know, like, it's more so the journey brought him closer to falsetto and Viola.
Which, in the end, seemed to have amounted to nothing, because by the end, they were pretty much just side characters. You know, I would have gotten a little more closure with that if we actually got some kind of, you know, where are they now segments, but, you know.
Blame
Bandai.
Bandai. Blame Bandai, not us.
It's like, oh man, Bandai.
Why would they blame us?
I don't know. You know how people are.
Who wouldn't? Whatever. Anyway.
Alright, so let's actually move on to falsetto.
Alright.
The beatboxer.
Okay, so falsetto is another character that the directors have not come forward and said what she represents. That being said, however, there is a common fan theory, I guess, or at least there's a conclusion that a lot of fans basically they reach the same conclusion, and I kind of can't help but agree, you know, to an extent. If you recall, more so in the beginning of the music history lessons, that there actually was a woman in Chopin's life. She was an author, and she went under the basically, I forgot what her real name was. I got to look it up on Wikipedia, but she went under a different pen name, and the pen name she went under was George Sand. So she pretty much went under a masculine name. She wore men's clothes. She smoked cigars. So it's like a very, very masculine woman, you know, completely out of her element, given the time period that they were in. And a lot of people tend to think that perhaps maybe this is what falsetto in some way represents, you know. A very, you know, very tough, you know, perhaps, you know, even like when you compare her to Claves, because Claves was very dainty, falsetto was not, you know. She's definitely more tomboyish. And it's like, you know, given with the fact that ultimately the relationship between Chopin and this woman, it ultimately doesn't end very well, clearly. And, you know, it does actually end up being very strained in the end, to the point where she actually she leaves him, I think, months before he ends up dropping dead. So I think between, her tomboyish attitude and the strained relationship that she was having with Jazz due to Claves and everything, I kind of have to agree with a lot of the fans that I personally think that's who Falsetto is supposed to represent.
Okay.
I don't know, to me that makes the most sense.
A tough woman who, in the end, has a failed relationship with someone she cares about. That's the
pretty much. Yeah, and then it's meanwhile, Claves over here, yeah, Claves, we barely got to know her. It's
well, I mean, we would, except for the part where she got stabbed.
Yeah, I mean, literally, she's introduced in Chapter 2. Chapter 3, she dies. So it's there's not a lot to work with Claves, just because we never really got the chance to know her.
Yeah, the only big thing that we knew about Clave was the fact that she had the hots for Jazz. But that's just about it.
More than the hots, I mean, she was dating him. So.
Yeah, it's she was going out with Jazz, and she was serving as a spy for Forte.
Yeah.
That's why everything that Aunt Dantina was doing up until that point was not really being very successful, is because Claves was giving Forte the information.
Yeah, pretty much.
That being said, however, from my understanding, even though Claves has not been in the game all that often, she actually does represent something.
Is that right?
She represents hope.
Hey.
Because if you remember, the big, long fucking monologue that she had as she's dying, where she would not shut up. She was going on and on and on about, how she ultimately regretted her actions. She wishes that she could have grown up with Jazz and Falsetto. And then she tried to make things right by warning Baroque that, hey, there's a spy amongst your ranks there. And then she died. So it's even though she ultimately kicks the bucket and pays the price for it, in the end, though, she represented more of a failed hope. She hoped that she could do things right. She hoped that she could be closer to Jazz. She hoped that she could warn Baroque before it was too late. And it ultimately backfired.
Wait. There's no such thing as failed hope. No such thing.
Yeah, there is.
No, there isn't.
Well, I mean, you can say that all you want, but the sad truth is there is hope that will ultimately.
I can hope for something to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow. That doesn't.
You don't know that.
Okay, I hope within the next 5 seconds that I will receive $1 million. 1, 2.
Okay,
3,
there's a difference.
4,
there's a
5.
difference between hoping and being asinine.
I hope to let a
it
girlfriend.
didn't happen.
Oh wait. Oh man.
Right. But here's another thing, because it's the thing that I can't also help is this will be a nice transition, I think, more so over into Serenade. Because, yeah, Serenade and Claves were the spies. And, again, no real concrete information as to what she represents, but she's very similar to Claves. I mean, similar situation. They were both spies. They were both feeding Forte information. They both fell in love with the leaders of Forte's enemies. But, and, and ultimately, and yeah, both tried to make things right in the end, so it's I guess maybe you could argue that they both represent hope. It's just, for whatever reason, Serenade was allowed to live.
There you go. See, no such thing as failed hope.
Yeah, for that one time.
My point is...
I suppose. That there will be failed hope in many other cases.
Jeez, no need to be so negative. It's not negative. It's not negativity.
That's the truth. I'm sorry, but it's the sad, unfortunate truth. I hate it too, bro.
I don't believe it.
I hate it too.
I don't believe it.
Yeah,
so
but
anyway,
it's it could be, it could be that maybe she represents hope alongside Claves, or it could be possible even, when we're first introduced to her, that's really where we see how she and Crescendo, they had opposite views on how to handle this upcoming conflict with Forte. Crescendo believed, yes, we should go to war and put an end to it. And Serenade, granted with this is probably her spy doing, but she even admits later on that she actually does believe that, violence isn't going to be the answer. We have to, take a step back and we should negotiate. So you have the two conflicting ideas with this impending war that's going on and everything. So, maybe, that's part of what she represents as well, because, there were a lot of wars and conflicts going on during Chopin's time. So, maybe she's the side that believes, maybe we shouldn't be fighting. We should be trying to negotiate. Because then that's, for all we know, that's probably the better way of achieving peace.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you got Crescendo over here, who's he's putting he's got a lot of responsibility on his hands because, he's the Prince of Baroque. He's got to worry about protecting his own people and everything. And Waltz clearly is not going to stop. So it's which is the better option? Trying to negotiate or just, putting an end to it all? Which would be the better option here?
Right.
So yeah, it's what do you guys think with Crescendo and Serenade?
Honestly, it's hard to say.
This is another case it's kind of hard to give a valid opinion about.
They're really aside from the whole war trope between them and the Serenade being a spy, there wasn't much else to them.
They both clearly, obviously wanted what was right for their people, even if that meant Serenade having to go against the orders of Count Waltz. So there's that.
Yeah.
In terms of everything else, though, it's weird. It's one of those situations where they Crescendo and Serenade they play their roles, but it seems like that's it. There's nothing really else to that.
I don't know I don't know if there's any real connection when it comes to Frederick himself in this case. I just envision them as just just royalty who just cares a lot for their people, their village, but that's just about it. What connection they have with Frederick and all of that, it's just like what BJ and Brendan have to say, it's kind of hard to say.
I have my own theory as to at least what Crescendo represents.
Alright.
So, as I mentioned before, how Jazz it represents the kind of man that Frederick wishes he could have been. If you recall where I had said that, while the whole Polish uprising and everything was going on, he was spirited away. He was in other countries and stuff. He was in Austria, he was in France. And, even though he's away from the conflict and the safety of another country, he still wishes, is there something more that I can do? So to me, that's a very similar situation to what Crescendo was under. A lot of the problems with the mineral powder, it was all on Forte. It was never really on Baroque's back door. So even though he was well aware that all these problems were going on and he's, pretty safe within his own country, he's constantly wishing that, is there something I can do? How can I stop this before it gets worse? And to me, it's the counter to Jazz. Whereas Jazz, I feel, represents the kind of man that Frederick wishes he could have been. Crescendo, I feel, it represents more of, this is who Frederick really was.
Oh, so more like the really a intelligent leader who also has compassion for others.
And wishing he can do more, but he's limited. That's at least how that's what I take away from Crescendo.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, a hell of a lot better than what I was thinking. I didn't even think about it like that. It's like, goddamn.
Yeah, so that's what happens when you play this game multiple times.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Now that at least covers the main party and everything. We're not going to go over every character because then we'll be here all goddamn day. But, if there's really any other character that I think that's probably worth discussing, it would be our main villain, Count Waltz. Because, oh lordy, did I love this villain.
Who voiced Count Waltz again? I'm trying to remember.
Liam O'Brien.
It's like, because when I heard his voice, it sounded so familiar. I'm trying to remember what else he voiced.
Gara from Naruto.
Yeah, duh. Okay. Let the record show that's actually been a while since I actually heard that for the first time. I'm sorry.
That's the role that. Well, that's probably the role that most people nowadays would probably recognize him as. Because not for nothing, Naruto, very popular show. Gara, very popular character. So of course, the guy that voices him, everybody's going to know. But outside of that, he also voiced Red 13 in Advent Children. He was. Really? He was the voice. He was the voice of Kane for Dissidia Duodecim.
Oh, nice.
I know he was in Revolutionary Girl Utena. He was in Descendants of Darkness. Oh god, he was in so much shit. So it's like, a lot of the roles that he plays are they're either crazies, villainous roles, or more like the darker characters. But he's got he's kind of got that voice that actually works with those kinds of roles.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, so Count Waltz, I know we talked about it a little bit during the final battle with him. So once again, developers, they don't say anything, but given the cutscene that they added in the PlayStation 3 version where we got his whole motivation behind everything that he's doing, like the whole reason that he was doing this whole, I'm gonna sacrifice my population into basically amassing this army of super soldiers that will allow me to just take over the world and everything, he wanted all of this power because he wanted a legacy. He wanted the world to remember him. Kind of a stupid way of going about it, but nevertheless,
what's completely drastic and what's the word? Unreasonable measures that any villain takes is not stupid.
Right. That's yeah.
I could have worded that so much better.
Well, it's the fact that he went through all these extreme means to achieve these goals and everything, and to me, that represents this was Frederick's greatest fear and his desire rolled into one, and obviously kicked up several thousand notches. It's the fact that, okay, when you die, when you die, what of you is going to be left behind? Is anything going to be left behind? Because, again, if you think back to Amelia, she died when she was 14. She didn't even have a chance to, leave her mark on the world. So that's where Frederick was probably, I can't help but feel that maybe Frederick was thinking, well, shit, if that happened to her and everything, and it's does that happen to everybody? Will that even happen to me, regardless of what I achieved? So it's I can't help but think that, maybe at some point he was thinking that and everything, and then, boom, we got the creation of Count Waltz.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I think it's hard to really talk about this right here, because we pretty much already went through with this whole shtick, during the Let's Play, so...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not much really to say. It's yes, Waltz had henchmen. He had Tuba and Fugue and Rondo, but it's one, they were barely in the game, and two, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that it's there is nothing meant for, they're just henchmen. They do not represent anything specific to Frederick. So... Yeah, so I mean, there's not really anything to really bring about with them, but and I guess maybe one last thing is the fortune teller at the cello tree and Polka's mother Solfege. Again, not much to really talk about with them, But for whatever reason, and this is never explained, so I don't know, maybe this is just, I guess, narrative choice or something. The whole idea with that these two specifically, for whatever reason, they understood what was going on. They understood that, yes, this is a dream world, and it's going through this perpetual cycle of suffering because Frederick could not accept Amelia's death. And that's where it's like, clearly that's what they represent. The fortune teller, she's kind of the one that says, oh yes, Polka, I've met you plenty of times, and you're going to draw bad fortune because you always draw bad fortunes, because it's the same outcome every single time. And then you have Solfege, who's dropping some hints here and there about, this is what Astra means, and this is what it means to people, and the whole thing about how, it is your fate to go into the sea and everything. I mean, Solfege was more or less telling Polka, yeah, this is what's going to happen. So it's like, it's kind of weird that it's like, you would choose, like, these two characters would be the ones that would be, like, I guess the most aware of what's going on. So it's like, I guess maybe it's just more of a narrative device or something.
Well, you said earlier that Sophie is supposed to represent Frederick's older sister.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if you look at the two characters and everything, I mean, it's very obvious that, that's what they're supposed... To me, anyway, it's like, they look so goddamn similar. I mean, that's where it's like, yeah, that's what Solfege is. She's the reflection of his older sister.
So then that makes some sort of sense, because I kind of want to imagine, as an older sister, she more than likely, like, she already lost one sibling, and now she's about to lose another. So I imagine having to go through that pain once, and then seeing it happen again, she's probably able to accept it a little better.
Oh, that's true.
So yeah, she knows what's going to happen, and she knows it's inevitable. So she just kind of accepts it. So that's just the way I see it, at least.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But now I guess this brings up, the question of the fortune teller at the cello tree. That's where it's like, I guess really she must be nothing more than narrative device, because really the only reason she is there is, oh, hi, Polka, nice to see you again, go draw your bad fortune now. And it's like, there's no character or anything that, like, it doesn't look like she represents anybody specifically. It doesn't look like, because we didn't really get to see any other people outside, like, in the real world, outside of, like, Frederick's sister, the doctor, and it's like, you didn't really, so it's like, I'm not quite sure where this old woman really comes in, but, maybe she's just there to be a narrative device.
Yeah, more than likely, yeah.
Okay, then.
Okay, yeah, so I think more or less that's pretty much it. I mean, we've gone through the main cast, we've gone through the main villain, we talked about these two people that live on the fourth wall. So, yeah, that's pretty much, I think, it. So, audience, I'm really curious, what are some of your interpretations with some of these characters, Again, like, I do feel like these characters, I mean, they were all very likable. For the most part, anyway, they do represent something with Frederick. And it's like, I just really, really loved the way they chose, the way they chose to not only develop the story, but to also develop Frederick. I mean, Frederick is his own character, certain. But the fact that, each character represented a piece and everything, and they kind of developed into their own characters, I guess you could say, like, in a way, kind of also reflects a little bit about Frederick. And it's like, I just really, really liked that method of storytelling. Because it's like, I've seen it be done in books. I've never really seen this be done in games.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's like, if I can actually bring up, like, there's a series of books that I actually like, a dark fantasy series by Anne Bishop. It's called the Black Jewels series. And the unique thing about the Black Jewels series is that your main character is, you have this one main character, but in all of the books, the story is never told through the main character's perspective. It is told through other people's perspective. So it's like, you kind of get the sense of, like, you know, when you see how these other characters view the main character, it kind of helps, like, it's a unique way to really develop the main character, because you have to take all these segments and kind of pile them all in together, and boom, you actually have a fully well-developed character, even though the story was never once told through that character's perspective. And it's like, I think that's a really unique way of telling a story, and I would love to see that happen in games, in JRPGs especially.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, I think this is probably the closest that we've ever gotten to it, because it's like, yeah, Frederick is the main character, and rather than having him being, like, you know, the party leader and everything, you know, because that's what Allegretto is for, they put him as a side character. And it's like, you know, it's an interesting choice, but it's like, I think, like, you know, that kind of ties into that whole thing where it's like, by letting the other characters take the center stage and having them develop and everything, and when you realize that each character represents something of this one character, you can take all the segments and compile them all together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, I can't help but feel like, you know, it's like, even like Final Fantasy, like, I've seen Square try to tackle, not necessarily very well, where it's like they were trying to do the whole thing where it's like, okay, here's a story, and, you know, we're gonna tell it through somebody else's eyes, and I see this. They tried to do this in Final Fantasies 10 and 12, and they failed in both regards, because it's like, you play Final Fantasy X, it's very obvious the main character is Yuna, but the story follows Tidus, who is fucking obnoxious as all hell, constantly goes on about how, you know, this is my story, and it's really not. And it's like, you know, I just want this guy to shut up and die already. But then you get, and meanwhile you go to Final Fantasy 12, where the story is clearly about Ash, Balthier, and Bosch, but the main character, they're the main characters, but the story follows Vaughn. And Vaughn's on the other end. You know, Vaughn is very, you know, he's not obnoxious or anything, but he's, you know, he's kind of quiet, kind of dull and boring. You know, he's not a very interesting character to follow. So it's like, you know, you tried it twice, and both times on opposite ends, you failed in that regard. But Eternal Sonata managed to, I would say, I think they managed to get really close to that idea.
Okay.
Alright.
Yeah, but that's more or less my little bit of a rant.
Alright.
Alrighty, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Now I think we are finally done with Eternal Sonata. You know, it's like, oh god, man, this was one hell of a journey, man.
But it was an amazing one nonetheless.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And now we get to move on to yet another amazing adventure.
Oh god, yes, and it's one that already several of you guys in the audience have already commented on, saying that either you want to see this happen or you expect to see it happen. You guys already know what's happening, so yeah, so yeah, let's just say, you know, I was listening, you know, Mama's listening to her children. So with that, you know, like I said, I'm going to take maybe about a week or two's break before we move on to the next game. So I will thoroughly enjoy that break before we move on into this beast. And I will see you all then.
Can you do me a solid?
No. No. No.